Y'all can come on over and we'll just kind of fill in behind here on the hearth and everything.
Okay, all right.
Keep you in the spotlight.
Well, you may want to stand here because you're a lot taller than I am. He's taller than I am. I'm just saying, if they see me behind him, he's a lot taller.
Looks very spiffy today.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Or you can just sport coat it.
I've got to really search for my suits now.
You don't have an occasion to wear them that much
No,
anymore.
not much.
They might.
No, I'm not answering any.
I know. It's all it's in the report.
Right.
Yeah.
I just defer to Dr. May.
There you go. That's.
That's, yeah, my boss is not going to have me talking out loud for myself. I'm proud of him right here.
Yeah, I know. I think I was in the same spot last time.
Yeah,
I think
I
actually,
wasn't
I think
here.
I got right here. So.
You gained a couple of inches
Yeah,
there.
it helped me a little bit.
Did we have a dark suit club or what?
I guess so. Somebody's dressing all up. I mean, Doug's gonna look gray on the end out there.
Oh, you good?
But you're coming for me.
Oh, I watched it. I watched it. That was
I know. I mean, the world's
I think all of the state of Arkansas.
Oh, I believe so. I think someone sent some prayers up there.
You know the fireplace at this thing?
Yeah. I've been in there.
Last was 2 years ago.
That was last year.
They played 2 years in a row.
They played 2 years ago.
Yeah. Really wanted the public school boys to be there.
Last players.
Oh,
Relax.
How you doing, Gus?
Really appreciate all your hard work on this. It's been quite an experience for you.
It's been amazing. I was just saying her, it's been amazing.
Not easy to see. We want you up here to appreciate it.
yes, sir.
There you go.
Well done, Bill.
Good afternoon to everyone. Let me make a couple general comments, then I'm going to ask Dr. Cheryl May to come to the podium. First of all, I am aware of 2 tornadoes hitting Arkansas over the last weekend, Hempstead County and Crawford County, and I'm receiving regular reports on damage there and any relief that's necessary, but I did want to express my understanding of that and that we're following that very closely. And A.J. Gary is here, our Director of Emergency Response, and is monitoring that very closely. Secondly, I wanted to advise you that I will be attending the memorial service for former President George Herbert Walker Bush on Wednesday at the National Cathedral. I think it's important that Arkansas express our affection for a former president and participate in that national celebration of his life and his service to our country. And so I will be attending with the First Lady that particular ceremony at the National Cathedral. I might add that the last time I was at the National Cathedral was the service for former President Ronald Reagan. So this will be certainly important for me to be there representing Arkansas on this occasion as well. The purpose that we are gathered here today is for me to receive the final report from the School Safety Commission that I designated by executive order, and that we received the first report 5 months ago today, actually, July 3. And at that time, I was pushing for the report to come in order for it to be applied, and the school districts have this available to them before the school year started, and they accomplished that objective. Secondly, they have spent a lot of time continuing their work on it, and I'm prepared to receive the final report today. And with that, this commission will have concluded its incredible work of public service. And I want to thank each of the commission members that are here, and this has been supported by the Department of Education, and Dr. Ivy Pfeffer is here. Our Deputy Commissioner, Commissioner Key, was not available to be here today, but this has been an extraordinary exercise that has exceeded my expectations. And I want Dr. May, and I'm stealing a little bit of her thunder, but I will tell this to all the commissioners that are here. I have a little bit of background in work in school safety, extensive background in school safety because of my work on the national level, and so I had occasion to see a lot of the things that are being done in different states. And this review that's been accomplished in this report, in my judgment, is the most comprehensive report that's been concluded by any state. This is comprehensive in its breadth, it's comprehensive in its recommendations, and I think I already know that it's had a very significant impact on our local school districts in terms of enhanced safety. But I also believe that this will be followed very closely by other states, other jurisdictions, and will be studied not just by school districts in Arkansas, but will be studied by school districts across the country. And so with that, let me introduce Dr. Cheryl May, who has been chairman of this, for her to introduce the commissioners and then also to present the final report. Dr. May.
Thank you, Governor, very much. And let me just divert just a second to thank you for your extraordinary leadership and confidence in us to do that. You're an extraordinary leader, and I think I speak for everybody that it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to help you with this important issue. Don Kamenar, the Department of Education. Jamie Cook, as you know, is your Director of Arkansas Law Enforcement Standards and Training. A.J. Gary, Director of Arkansas Department of Emergency Management, Mr. Bill Temple, former SAC and my Vice Chair on this committee, Superintendent David Hopkins of the Clarksville School District. We have Will Jones. I was trying to think. It's the Deputy Attorney General. Yes, ma'am. At the Attorney General's office. Marvin Burton, who is Deputy Superintendent of the Little Rock School District. Don Anderson with the Hot Springs School District. Dr. Pfeiffer, and of course my right arm in all of this, Doug Bradbury. I'm going to thank you, Doug, very, very much for everything that you've done. We couldn't have made it without you. As the governor said, he signed a proclamation on March 4th and gave us our marching orders. We provided a preliminary report to him in July, the 1st of July, and since July we've continued a lot of our efforts. During the course of what we've done as a commission, we have listened to 30 presentations. We visited 12 schools. All those schools were extremely diverse, and I think that's something that's really important to talk about, is that we went to small schools. We went to small schools like Deer Mount Judy and large schools like Bentonville. We went to rural schools. We went to urban schools. We went to schools that are better financially off than those. We also did a charter school and a private school. And I think I also don't want to put words in his mouth, but as a commission, we're very, very grateful for all of those presenters, and also to the superintendents and the schools and the staff for welcoming us and providing us with much needed information. We ended up, sir, with 30 recommendations for you to consider. It's been an honor and a privilege to work with these extraordinary individuals. You did a tremendous job in selecting individuals, and it's my privilege to provide you with our final report.
Thank you, Dr. May. As I said, this is an extraordinarily comprehensive report, and while we will continue to study this as other education leaders will be studying it, I have had an opportunity to review it over the weekend in preliminary draft, and I see some of the recommendations that are and information provided helps us to see the direction that we need to go at our local level to enhance security and safety for our children going to school. I do see a number of legislators that are here, and I wanted to thank them for their support of this commission and for what they do in the area of school safety as well. I did want to make a few comments about the report. First of all, it continues the philosophy that school security and safety decisions has to be made at the local level. Every school district is different, they're designed different, you have different cultures, and they ultimately have to make the decisions on what is best for their district. This report makes recommendations that reflect best practices that the Commission has observed in different school districts across Arkansas and as they've studied more broadly across the country. The recommendations are very broad-ranging. Obviously, one of them is that no campus should ever be without an armed presence. And what I've been encouraged with, which to me is a fundamental concept and recommendation, that 70% of our school districts in Arkansas have at least one school safety resource officer, and 54 SROs have been added this year. I believe that is a direct result of the recommendations of this report. 79%, according to the school safety survey, 79% of the SROs receive specialized training, and that is being enhanced every day. When it comes to our commissioned school security officers, there's 15% of the districts that responded saying that they utilize commissioned school security officers, and so this also reflects an increase of that utilization and to provide that level of armed response on the campuses of our children. In addition to that fundamental point, the recommendations also encourage the establishment of district safety and security teams that would have the responsibility of overseeing security, making recommendations on it, conducting regular audits, and three-year reviews to see how their plans should be updated. They ask for a school staff person to be designated as a school safety coordinator. And as you can see, the recommendations do not all cost money. Now, sometimes they add responsibility, but this is something that small districts, every school district can designate a staff person that can have the responsibility of a school safety coordinator and receive additional training in that regard. One of the recommendations is that school nurses and staff be trained in emergency medical response. Clearly, this will save lives in the event some tragedy occurs. There are many recommendations in the area of mental health, and this is one of the specific encouragements that I had, or directives to the Commission, that they not just explore armed response capacity, but also look at the mental health issues of our schools and how that ties into safety and security. Part of the recommendation is that the school districts conduct school climate surveys that will understand what the mental health climate is of a local school, and recommendation for more direct counseling that will be conducted by the school counselors and personnel. There are many other different recommendations, but those are just a couple that I would draw attention to. I believe that this is a report that is not going to sit on anybody's desk without action. Based upon my conversations with school districts and superintendents, they have already responded to the recommendations. I think they'll continue to enhance their capacity. And one of the recommendations is in the area of facilities, and that the recommendation is very specific that our facilities partnership funding should be available for enhancement of physical security in the schools. And this is an important recommendation that is a change from the present law, and I look forward to working with our Department of Education to implement this in the right way. But I believe this will be of assistance from a state level to the local school districts as they look at physical security. Secondly, there is a recommendation that to our federal delegation that they assist us in making some federal school grant money available, not just in terms of academics but also in terms of security. There's nothing more fundamental than a safe and secure school, and that the utilization of federal grants as well as state partnership money will be of assistance to our schools so that all the burden does not fall upon them. So with that, I want to thank the commissioners again for your excellent work and the contribution that you have made on a volunteer basis to the security of our schools and our children. With that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Governor, the recommendation that no campus should be without element presence when children are attending class or extracurricular activities, do you think that's something that needs to be mandated legislatively? And also beyond that, since you're coming close to the session, what in here do you see needs to be addressed legislatively?
Great question, and I do not believe that should be mandated. That is a recommendation, and but the final decision should be made by the local school district and local school leadership. And from obviously the fact that 70% of our schools have a school resource officer, and additional number have commissioned security staff, then that means that they agree with that by and large, but the ultimate decision has to be made by them, and they'll make different decisions as to how to apply that. Different arrangements with the local sheriff's department or police department as to the funding of those as well. But I see that increasingly both in need and both in response. In terms of the legislative session, I think we need to spend a little bit more time in looking at this, but I would encourage our members of the General Assembly, just because there's a recommendation made, I'm not in favor of putting that into law. I have enough confidence in our local school districts that they will respond appropriately and adjust it as needed to their local sensibilities, some of their local uniqueness, and will implement it in a more secure way. But I don't believe it is necessary to put all these recommendations, and they should not be put into a legislative mandate. And so we want to be able to avoid that. We do want to look at it as to is there any adjustment need to be made in the law in terms of facility partnership money being utilized for security measures? I don't know whether we can do that by rule or whether that needs to be legislative guidance. There might be some other areas, but I think they would, by and large, these are recommendations that are to be adopted by the local school districts.
Did you get any feedback from school districts when the initial recommendations were made in July? Anything that prompted any changes?
And I'll answer that, and Dr. May might have a supplement answer to it, but I've been to a lot of school districts myself, since July, and I've met with school leadership at various levels, and I went to one school district, and the school safety committee had been formed, and they were reviewing the recommendations and seeing how this should be implemented into the school district. I went to another school district, and they had SROs, but they were supplementing their SROs with some commission staff. And so I went to another school district, and they had been reading it over the weekend. And so those were anecdotal information based upon my personal observation, but it's been a very extensive response and a widely read response. Dr. May, or do you have anything? And I invite any other commissioner if they wanted to comment on that from your experience.
Yep. One of the things that we did after the preliminary report is that we administered a school safety survey. And one of the questions that we ask is, what changes did the districts intend to do based on our preliminary report? And 76% of those that responded said they were going to make physical security changes. Others, 59% emergency operation drills and audits. Law enforcement and security, 57%. Mental health and prevention, 55%. And intelligence and communication, 39%. So we got the overall feeling that that they were going to make at least one of those changes, if not multiple changes from that.
See, I provide anecdotal information. She provides statistical information. That's why you're chairman of this commission.
Is there any plan to follow up maybe in a year or 6 months?
I think that remains to be seen. First of all, this commission was established by executive order that their work has ended. And that's my model of a new commission, is that they do their work and then they go home. We don't need a permanent oversight at the state level. Now, I hope that we will be able to see a year from now, first of all, that there not be any incidences in Arkansas. That would be a real answer to prayer, but also because of security initiatives. Secondly, I do believe anytime that you initiate something like this, it needs to be reviewed. This is something that our Department of Education can review and to see the measure of implementation on these security measures, whether there is any additional gaps that we need to address in the future. So I would expect a review of this in a year, but it would be by the Department of Education. We'll see where we go from there.
Governor, just want to make sure I got this down. You are for facilities funding being used for security. You're just not sure it needs to be done by rule or by law. Is that right?
That's correct. I support that. Now, like right now, if you have a school that is being built and utilizing partnership money, well, the architect designs a school based upon what is the best and most modern architecture that will facilitate security. So that is changed by architecture, and so we're already funding it for new schools in some ways. But I think we have to look at the utilization of it might be an older school that needs to be retrofitted to enhance security. And so we need to look at this as to how this impacts funding, but I do believe that our facilities funding needs to be utilized in part for security purposes, including retrofitting.
Do you think there needs to be, should there be additional facilities funding to deal with the number of requests that would come in for security in addition to what there are?
I believe our facilities funding under the budget I submitted is sufficient for this year. I think you have to evaluate it year by year, and that's something that our facilities partnership director can take a look at the school, see the number of applications and needs that are out there, but also, you know, we don't want to simply use this as another means for retrofitting schools when there's not a legitimate need. So you need to have that reviewed by security professionals as well and say, is this going to make a real difference in the safety for our children? Is this something that could be done by other means? And so we want to have a controlled environment there, but we also, you know, I'm asking the local school districts to assume responsibility for the personnel cost for armed security presence. They bear the costs of SROs. You know, the mental health counseling is part of this. You know, that is something that we need to continue to look at from a state perspective as to whether there needs to be more done there. But in this area of physical security, I think we do need to be able to support them through our facilities funding.
Are there any other areas in here, especially when we talk about school resource officers, any areas where you're looking at additional funding that may need to be done beyond?
The focus would be on the mental health side. That's been a priority of mine through our crisis stabilization units. It's been a priority of mine in terms of drug treatment counseling, in terms of our juvenile justice reform, having more community-based resources that are available. And this pattern fits in with the mental health resources that are available for our schools. While you would like to say, well, our school counselors are sufficient if they spend the time necessary in direct counseling, but they're really not equipped to handle some of the more sophisticated or difficult challenges in our schools from a mental health standpoint, and they have to be able to refer them to, when they identify a challenge from a mental health standpoint, to refer them to a mental health provider in that community. So that's something we'll continue to look at as to what is our level of resources in our communities in terms of mental health support, because that also will help our schools.
Are there any recommendations in here that give you pause or that you don't agree with?
Boy, you know, you must have went for a run this weekend and thought of that while you were running. That was a good question. You know, the answer is no. I've gone through it in a fairly quick read, but somewhat thorough, and I thought all the recommendations were appropriate. You know, this commission probably understands my philosophy, and maybe that's included in the fact that there is local decision making and flexibility, and you know, I go through there in terms of the merits of the recommendations, then I go through there in terms of the cost of the recommendations. And I think this is a good balance, that recognizing that not all school districts are wealthy, and so there's recommendations here that can be applied to a local school district that doesn't have all the resources needed. So the short answer is I've not identified anything that I disagree with at all, and I applaud the commission for its balance and its flexibility and its recognition that we have to be able to address these challenges in a cost-effective way as well as an enhanced security way.
Governor, over the summer you said you would be open to red flag legislation. Is that still the case? And if so, is that something that should be tied into this?
I believe the commission was wise to not tie in red flag laws into the recommendations, because this commission focused on schools, and red flag laws are much broader than the schools, and so it's really a separate issue. You know, in terms of what the legislature might do, I'm simply aware that various legislators have indicated an interest in this, and I don't want to foreclose what they might do and send my direction, but I have not seen at this point any proposed red flag law that I see has the due process protections that are necessary. And so that's the basis on which I will judge any proposed law in that regard as to whether it has due process protections in place, and I haven't seen any at this point that I could support. Thank you all for your attention to this important matter. Again, let me thank the commissioners. Job well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. You did a tremendous job. We appreciate you.
Well, I was referring to your district there.
Yeah, I thought I recognized that.
I love anecdotes.
Yes,
That was
sir.
really cool. We're coming up with the statistics after that. And I do appreciate the AG's office being involved in this.
Thanks for having us.
I appreciate it. Good exercise.
Work well together.